So in this part, I'm going to look at how our lot at the time of the end will be determined. Whether we will be raised in the first resurrection, whether we will be raised in the second resurrection, or of those who will be raised in the second resurrection, what their lot will be. Now, I said in the first part of this Life After Death series that when Hebrews 9:27 says, "And it has been appointed for man to die once, and after this the judgment," that what it might be talking about is once you die, then you will go either to one place in Sheol, Abraham's bosom, and be close with Abraham, or you will go to where the rich man ended up, where he was tormented by the flame of his destruction. Because in and of itself, that is a judgment having been made of you. Now, when it says the judgment here, we know that it's not referring to the judgment of all men, as in the judgment by Yahuwah, by Yeshua of all men, because judgment is singular, whereas we see multiple judgments in Scripture, which makes me think even more that the judgment that this is talking about is when you die, you will either go to one side of Sheol or the other. You will have been judged already at that point as to your fate, so to speak. However, the judgment of you according to your works by Yeshua, that will be separate, and there are multiple judgments of that type which we'll look at in this part. 2 Corinthians 5:10-11 says, "For we all have to appear before the judgment seat of Messiah, in order for each one to receive according to what he has done in the body, whether good or evil. Knowing therefore the fear of Yehovah, we persuade men, but we have been made manifest to Elohim, and I also trust in your consciences to have been manifested." So we see from this that we will each appear before the judgment seat of Yeshua, of Mashiach, and we will be judged according to our works. In John 5:24 it says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, he who hears my word and believes in him who sent me possesses everlasting life, and does not come into judgment, but has passed from death into life." Now we know that the scriptures don't contradict one another, so each of us will appear before the judgment seat of Mashiach. As I mentioned earlier, this judgment is synonymous with being judged wicked, the judgment. He does not come into judgment, rather, not the judgment. He does not come into judgment. Just like, as I mentioned, Sheol is mentioned in various places, synonymous with those who have gone down to Sheol and will suffer the death of the soul. In Proverbs 15:24 it says, "The path of life is upward for the wise, to turn away from Sheol below." Okay, and that is talking about one's soul being delivered from Sheol if you walk in the path of life, if you're one of the wise. In Job 24 verse 19 it says, "Drought and heat snatch away snow waters. Sheol snatches away those who have sinned." Okay, so it's speaking of Sheol here, of as snatching away those who have sinned, because the power of Sheol is the death of the soul if you are not delivered from Sheol. So sometimes Sheol is spoken of as the end of those whom are not delivered from it. Okay, but it just says Sheol is where sinners go. Well, it is where sinners go, but it's where all men go, just some are delivered from it. But Sheol is the ultimate end for those who have sinned. And judgment is spoken of in the same sort of way here. You pass into judgment is those who have lost their souls, who have suffered the second death as a result of their actions. Psalm 116, 1-8 says, I love Yehovah because he has heard my voice, my pleas, because he has inclined his ear to me, and I shall call throughout my days. The cords of death were around me, and the pains of Sheol came upon me. I found distress and sorrow. Then I called upon the name of Yehovah. O Yehovah, I pray to you, deliver my soul. Yehovah shows favor and is righteous, and our Elohim is compassionate. Yehovah guards the simple. I was brought low, but he saved me. Return to your rest, O my soul, for Yehovah has treated you well. For you have delivered my soul from death, my eyes from tears, my feet from falling. So not that one soul doesn't go to Sheol, not that one never cries, not that one's feet never fall, but that Yehovah, through his power, has delivered us from all of those things. Matthew 23:14-15 says, Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you eat up widows' houses, and for a show make long prayers. Because of this you shall receive greater judgment. So we can see from this that there is a gradation in judgment. For some, lesser judgment; for some, greater judgment. This appears to be talking about the severity of the judgment here. Verse 15 says, Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you go about the land and the sea to win one convert, and when he is won, you make him a son of Gehenna, twofold more than yourselves. So again, we see this gradation in judgment. We see a similar term used in James 3 verse 1. Not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, knowing that we shall receive greater judgment. And perhaps in this case, instead of the severity of the judgment, it is talking about how exacting the judgment is, how closely one is observed and judged, although it certainly could be talking about the severity of the judgment also. Matthew 5 verse 19 says, Whoever then breaks one of the least of these commands and teaches men so shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does and teaches them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. I think a lot of the time when people look at this, they think that there are going to be some people who have taught against the commands in the kingdom, and they'll be least, and those who have taught the commands will be great. But that's not necessarily how this is. What it says is they will be called least, or they will be called great in the kingdom. Could be referring to how they are referred to in the kingdom. Those who teach against the commands are least. Those who teach the commands are great. Hebrews 4 verse 12 says, The word of Elohim is living and working and sharper than any two-edged sword, cutting through even to the dividing of soul and spirit, and of joints and marrow, and able to judge the thoughts and intentions of the heart. And indeed, it is the word of Elohim by which we are judged at the end. Yeshua in John 5 said, Do not think that I shall accuse you to the Father. There is one who accuses you, Moshe, in whom you have set your expectation. So he's speaking to people and saying, look, you've set your expectation in the fact that you've got the Torah. Actually, it's the Torah by which you're going to be judged. It's not me that's going to accuse you to the Father. It's going to be the word of Elohim, which is going to show you, it's going to be a witness against you that you are in transgression against it. In Proverbs 24 verse 12, we see something important to bear in mind when we're thinking about people being judged. It says, If you say, see, we did not know this, Would not he who weighs the hearts discern it? He watches over your soul. Would he not know it? He who watches over your soul. Would he not know it? And shall he not repay man according to his work? So again, throughout it, we see the people are repaid according to their work. People who did not know something, Yehovah knows that. He who weighs their hearts is going to know what they knew and what they didn't know. To whom much is given, much shall be expected. So if you know much of the word, that is an abundant blessing to you. But if you know much of the word and you decide to go against the word, then that will be a serious infraction. Whereas people who did what was wrong but did not know will be judged differently, as Yeshua says in Luke 12. And that servant who knew his master's desire or his master's will, and did not prepare, nor did according to his desire, shall be beaten with many stripes. But he who did not know, yet did what deserved flogging, shall be beaten with few. And everyone to whom much has been given, from him much shall be demanded. And to whom much has been entrusted, from him much more shall be asked. I came to send fire on the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled. So, if somebody knows what Yehovah's will is and doesn't do it, then that is worse than somebody who doesn't know what his will is and yet does what is wrong in his eyes. Those who do not know will be held to a different standard than those who do know, because those who do know are sinning willfully. Matthew 3 verse 12 says, his winnowing fork is in his hand, and he shall thoroughly cleanse his threshing floor, and gather his wheat into the storehouse, but the chaff he shall burn with unquenchable fire. So we see there the two ultimate ends of people. Some will be gathered into a storehouse, and some will be burned with fire. Some of those who are gathered into a storehouse, however, will not be those who believe in Yeshua, who believe in the word. Okay, some of them, as we see in Matthew 25, when the nations are judged, and some of those of the nations are gathered into the kingdom, as we will get onto, are not people who believe. They are people who did good works towards those who believed at the time of the end, or in the end times, as we would more traditionally think of it. The chaff, however, that which he doesn't want, he burns with unquenchable fire. Matthew 7:21-23 says, not everyone who says to me, Master, Master, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he who is doing the will of my Father in heaven. So just calling Yeshua Master is not enough. Okay, some people will not call him Master, and yet they will be gathered into the storehouse. Some people will call him Master, and yet will be those burned with unquenchable fire. Verse 22 says, many shall say to me in that day, Master, Master, have we not prophesied in your name, and cast out demons in your name, and done many mighty works in your name? And then I shall declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who work Anomia. Okay, translated here as lawlessness. The Greek word anomia, when we have words which mean without, we put an A at the beginning, like we may say that somebody is amoral, without morality. Okay, nomia is from the word nomos, which means law. The Hebrew word for law parallels the Greek word. It is Torah or Torah. Okay, so the nomos is the law. The Torah or the Torah is also the law. Anomia is to be without law, translated here as lawlessness. Really what it's getting at is those who act as if there is no law. By the law, sin is defined. As Paul said, he said, I would not know sin if it were not for the law. So anomia is sin, and we see that in 1 John 3 verse 4. Everyone doing sin also does lawlessness, and sin is anomia. I came to send fire on the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled. So if somebody knows what Yehovah's will is and doesn't do it, then that is worse than somebody who doesn't know what his will is and yet does what is wrong in his eyes. Those who do not know will be held to a different standard than those who do know, because those who do know are sinning willfully. Matthew 3 verse 12 says, his winnowing fork is in his hand, and he shall thoroughly cleanse his threshing floor, and gather his wheat into the storehouse, but the chaff he shall burn with unquenchable fire. So we see there the two ultimate ends of people. Some will be gathered into a storehouse, and some will be burned with fire. Some of those who are gathered into a storehouse, however, will not be those who believe in Yeshua, who believe in the word. Okay, some of them, as we see in Matthew 25, when the nations are judged, and some of those of the nations are gathered into the kingdom, as we will get onto, are not people who believe. They are people who did good works towards those who believed at the time of the end, or in the end times, as we would more traditionally think of it. The chaff, however, that which he doesn't want, he burns with unquenchable fire. Matthew 7:21-23 says, not everyone who says to me, Master, Master, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he who is doing the will of my Father in heaven. So just calling Yeshua Master is not enough. Okay, some people will not call him Master, and yet they will be gathered into the storehouse. Some people will call him Master, and yet will be those burned with unquenchable fire. Verse 22 says, many shall say to me in that day, Master, Master, have we not prophesied in your name, and cast out demons in your name, and done many mighty works in your name? And then I shall declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who work anomia. Okay, translated here as lawlessness. The Greek word anomia, when we have words which mean without, we put an A at the beginning, like we may say that somebody is amoral, without morality. Okay, nomia is from the word nomos, which means law. The Hebrew word for law parallels the Greek word. It is Torah or Torah. Okay, so the nomos is the law. The Torah or the Torah is also the law. Anomia is to be without law, translated here as lawlessness. Really what it's getting at is those who act as if there is no law. By the law, sin is defined. As Paul said, he said, I would not know sin if it were not for the law. So anomia is sin, and we see that in 1 John 3 verse 4. Everyone doing sin also does lawlessness, and sin is anomia. So Yeshua is saying to the people in Matthew 7, here in verse 23, he says, and then I shall declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who work sin. Because sin is anomia. That's what anomia is, being without law, being lawless. You see here he says in verse 21, not everyone who says to me, Master, Master, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he who is doing the will of my Father in heaven. So what is the will of the Father? He says, you're not doing the will of the Father. Depart from me, you who do sin, you who are without law. What is the will of the Father? I have delighted to do your will, O my Elohim, your Torah is within my heart. That's the Hebrew word which is used there, is Torah. It means law, just like nomos means law in Greek. Anomia is to be without law. Well, those who don't do the will of the Father are those who are without law, without Torah. Here the psalmist says, I've delighted to do your will. Your Torah is within my heart. Those who don't do his will are those who are without Torah, are without the teaching and instruction of Elohim. And they are the ones that Yeshua tells to depart from him. Luke 6:46-49 says, but why do you call me Master, Master, and do not do what I say? Everyone who is coming to me and is hearing my words and is doing them, I shall show you whom he is like. Okay, so if you remember, he says, not everyone who says to me, Master, Master, is going to end up in the kingdom. There are those who are without being taught or instructed by Elohim, those who are without his law, his nomos, his Torah, those who do not hear and do Elohim's words. Everyone who is coming to me and is hearing my words and is doing them, he is like a man building a house who dug deep and laid the foundation on the rock. And when a flood came, the stream burst against that house, but was unable to shake it, for it was founded on the rock. But the one hearing and not doing, those who are without law, is like a man who built a house on the earth without a foundation, against which the stream burst, and immediately it fell, and the fall of that house was great. So those who come to Yeshua and they say to him, Master, Master, but they don't do what he says. They do not do the Torah. They do not do the nomos, the law of Elohim. They are these people who hear but do not do. The one hearing and not doing, as it says here in verse 49, it's like a man who built a house on the earth without a foundation. That's what the word of Elohim is. It is our foundation. So it's no point calling Yeshua Master and not doing the word of Elohim. So those who will be cast into the fire will include those who call Yeshua Lord or call him Master, but he will say to them, depart from me, I never knew you. You were not foreknown to me. You were never one of the chosen. Matthew 13:47-50 says, again, the kingdom of heaven is like a dragnet that was thrown into the sea and gathered some of every kind, which when it was filled they drew to the shore, and they set it down and gathered the good into containers, but threw the rotten away. So the kingdom of heaven, those people who will call Yeshua Master, among them there is good and there is bad, and they will be divided one from the other. Thus it shall be at the end of the age. The angels shall come forth and separate the wicked out the midst of the righteous, and shall throw them into the furnace of fire. There shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth. So, wailing is obviously crying. Gnashing of teeth is idiomatic, figurative for frustration. There's going to be crying and frustration, as you can well imagine. If there are people who thought that they were Yeshua's servants all of their life, and then they're told at the time of the end, no, you were in the kingdom of heaven, but you were the bad that was separated out. You can imagine those people being very upset and frustrated that they were to be cast into the lake of fire. Matthew 22:11-14 says, and when the king came in to view the guests, he saw there a man who had not put on a wedding garment. And he said to him, friend, how did you come in here not having a wedding garment? And he was speechless. Then the king said to the servants, bind him hand and foot, take him away, and throw him out into the outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen. So, just being called by Elohim, calling him Master, is not enough to be one of the chosen who are foreknown by him. Now, the king here at the wedding is figurative, is a parable about the wedding supper of the Lamb. So how are we to be attired? What is the wedding garment which we are to wear? Revelation 19:7-8 says, "Let us be glad and rejoice and give him praise, for the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his wife prepared herself. And to her it was given to be dressed in fine linen, clean and bright." This is the wedding garment. And what is that? For the fine linen is the righteousnesses of the set apart ones. So again, we are judged according to our works. We must be found suitably attired for the wedding, dressed in fine linen, which is righteousness. Matthew 24:48-51 says, "But if that evil servant says in his heart, 'My master is delaying his coming,' and begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with the drunkards, the master of that servant shall come on a day when he does not expect it, and at an hour he does not know, and shall cut him in two and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth." So again, you can be one who calls yourself the servant of Elohim. However, if you begin to act in an unrighteous manner, Yeshua will come at a time when you are not expecting it. Why? Because you're not attending to your behavior. And you will be appointed your portion with the hypocrites. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth from those who think that they know Elohim, who say that they believe in God, that they read the Bible, and they call Yeshua Master. In Luke 13:22-28, it says, "And he was going through the cities and villages, teaching and journeying toward Jerusalem. And someone said to him, 'Master, are there few who are being saved?' And he said to them, 'Strive to enter through the narrow gate, because many, I say to you, shall seek to enter in and shall not be able. Many are going to seek to enter the narrow gate, which only few find, but they will not be able to. When once the master of the house has risen up and shut the door, and you begin to stand outside and knock at the door, saying, Master, Master, open for us, he shall answer and say to you, I do not know you, where you are from. Then you shall begin to say, We ate and drank in your presence, and you taught in our streets. But he shall say, I say to you, I do not know you, where you are from. Depart from me, all you workers of unrighteousness, you who work anomia, you who work sin. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth when you see Abraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov and all the prophets in the kingdom of Elohim, and yourselves thrown outside." Matthew 13:40-42 says, As the tares then are gathered and burned in the fire, so it shall be at the end of this age. The Son of Adam shall send out his angels, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all the stumbling blocks and those doing anomia or sin, and shall throw them into the furnace of fire. There shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth from his servants. They're the ones who weep and are frustrated because he gathers out of his kingdom the tares. There will be good and there will be bad. The bad are bundled up and burned in the fire. 2 Peter 2:4-9 says, For if Elohim did not spare the angels who sinned, but sent them to Tartarus, and delivered them into chains of darkness to be kept for judgment, and did not spare the world of old, but preserved Noah, a proclaimer of righteousness, and 7 others, bringing in the flood on the world of the wicked. And having reduced to ashes the cities of Sodom and Amorah, condemned them to destruction, having made them an example to those who afterward would live wickedly, and rescued righteous Lot, who was oppressed with the indecent behavior of the lawless. For day after day that righteous man dwelling among them tormented his righteous soul by seeing and hearing their lawless works or their sinful deeds. Okay, so it says here in verse 6, having reduced to ashes the cities of Sodom and Amorah, he condemned them to destruction. And that was an example to those who afterward would live wickedly. That is the outcome for the wicked. They will be reduced to ashes and destroyed. Verse 9 says, Then Yehovah knows how to rescue the reverent ones from trial, and to keep the unrighteous unto the day of judgment to be punished. So Yehovah knows how to keep the reverent ones from trial, how to rescue them from trial. But also the unrighteous, even those among his kingdom who are unrighteous, are kept unto the day of judgment to be punished. Judgment, again, used in its negative sense here to talk of those who are judged and found wanting. So just as those among his kingdom can be found unworthy, we certainly can be found worthy. So we have the consequences of sin being a part of his kingdom, but we also have rewards that are promised to us. We see these in Revelation 2 and 3. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the assemblies. To him who overcomes, I shall give to eat from the tree of life, which is in the midst of the paradise of Elohim. So that is certainly one of the rewards. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the assemblies. He who overcomes shall by no means be harmed by the second death, as we've seen previously. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the assemblies. To him who overcomes, I shall give some of the hidden manna to eat, and I shall give him a white stone, and on the stone a new name written, which no one knows except him who receives it. He who overcomes shall be dressed in white robes, and I shall by no means blot out his name from the book of life, but I shall confess his name before my Father and before his angels. And he who overcomes and guards my works until the end, to him I shall give authority over the nations. They will rule and reign with Messiah, and he shall shepherd them with a rod of iron, as the potter's vessel shall be broken to pieces, as I also have received from my Father. He who overcomes, I shall make him a supporting post, or a supporting pillar in the dwelling place of my Elohim, and he shall by no means go out, and I shall write on him the name of my Elohim, and the name of the city of my Elohim, the new Jerusalem, which comes down out of heaven from my Elohim, and my new name. To him who overcomes, I shall give to sit with me on my throne. They will rule and reign with Messiah, as I also overcame and sat down with my Father on his throne in heaven. So they are some of the specific rewards which we are told about. Rewards are mentioned elsewhere in the scriptures. In Matthew 16:24-27 it says, Then Yeshua said to his disciples, If anyone wishes to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his soul shall lose it, and whoever loses his soul for my sake shall find it. For what is a man profited if he gains all the world and loses his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? For the Son of Adam is going to come in the esteem of his Father with his angels, and then he shall reward each according to his works. And we're going to see about Yeshua coming in his esteem with his angels and giving everyone according to their works of people who are not the brethren. We will read of that in Matthew 25. But the point that Yeshua makes here is that if you gain all of the world, but your soul is to die upon death, what does it really profit you? Profits you nothing. And what will you give in exchange for your soul? The only ransom for your soul is Yeshua's blood. It is only Elohim who can pay the ransom for your soul, to not be under the power of death, the power of Sheol, to be destroyed, which is the second death. Matthew 6:19-20 says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasure on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal." 1 Corinthians 3:10-15 says, "According to the favor of Elohim which was given to me, as a wise master builder I have laid the foundation, and another builds on it. But each one should look how he builds on it. For no one is able to lay any other foundation except that which is laid, which is Yeshua Messiah," or the word of Elohim, as Yeshua put it. Yeshua being the word made flesh, of course. "And if anyone builds on this foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, straw, each one's work will be revealed, for the day will show it up, because it is revealed by fire. And the fire shall prove the work of each one, what sort it is. If anyone's work remains, which he is built on, he shall receive a reward. If anyone's work is burned, he shall suffer loss, but he himself shall be saved, but so as through fire." So our works will be proved, so to speak, by fire. What the fire leaves, what remains, is that which is built or founded on the word of Elohim. Luke 6:26 says, "Woe to you when all men speak well of you, for thus the fathers did to the false prophets." If we contrast that with what Yeshua says in Matthew 5:11-12, it says, "Blessed are you when they reproach and persecute you, and falsely say every wicked word against you for my sake. Rejoice and be glad, because your reward in heaven is great, for in this way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." So if all men speak well of you, woe to you, because that's what they did to the false prophets. But if you're speaking truth, then your reward in heaven will be great. 2 Peter 3:1-14 says, "This is now, beloved ones, the second letter I write to you, in which I stir up your sincere mind to remember the words previously spoken by the set-apart prophets, and of the command of the Master and Saviour spoken by your apostles, knowing this first, that mockers shall come in the last days with mocking, walking according to their own lusts, and saying, Where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all continues as from the beginning of creation. For they choose to have this hidden from them, that the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water by the word of Elohim, through which the world at that time was destroyed, being flooded with water. And the present heavens and the earth are treasured up by the same word, being kept for fire, to a day of judgment and eternal punishment, punishing of wicked men. No, the destruction of wicked men, like the world in the past was destroyed. But beloved ones, let not this one matter be hidden from you, that with Yehovah 1 day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is 1 day. Yehovah is not slow in regards to the promise, as some count slowness, but is patient toward us, not wishing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. But the day of Jehovah shall come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with intense heat, and the earth and the works that are in it shall be burned up. Seeing all these are to be destroyed in this way, what kind of people ought you to be in set-apart behavior and reverence, because you might be destroyed in that way? Looking for and hastening the coming of the day of Elohim, through which the heavens shall be destroyed, being set on fire, and the elements melt with intense heat. But according to his promise, we wait for a new heavens and a new earth, in which righteousness dwells. So then, beloved ones, looking forward to this, do your utmost to be found by him in peace, spotless and blameless. Mark 9:33-35 says, And they came to Capernaum, and being in the house he asked them, saying, What was it you disputed among yourselves on the way? And they were silent, for on the way they had disputed with one another who was the greatest. And sitting down, he called the 12 and said to them, If anyone wishes to be first, he shall be last of all and servant of all. Okay, so in the way that we would think of those who are first and those who are last, i.e. those who perhaps are ruling over people, that's how man might think of somebody who was first. Yeshua said, with you, it will not be that way. Okay, if you want to be great, then you will be the servant of all. That is who will be judged to be great. In Mark 10:35-45 it says, And Yaakov and Yochanan, the sons of Zabdi, came up to him, saying, Teacher, we wish that you would do for us whatever we ask. And he said to them, What do you wish me to do for you? And they said to him, Grant us to be seated in your glory, or in your esteem, same word in Greek, on one on your right hand and the other on your left. But Yeshua said to them, You do not know what you ask. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, and be immersed with the immersion that I am immersed with? And they said to him, We are able. And Yeshua said to them, You shall indeed drink the cup that I drink, and with the immersion that I am immersed with, you shall be immersed. But to sit on my right hand and on my left, remember, when he comes in his glory or in his esteem, is not mine to give, but it is for those to whom it has been prepared, or for whom it has been prepared. And when the 10 heard it, they began to be sorely displeased with Yaakov and Yochanan. And Yeshua, calling them near, said to them, You know that those who think to rule the nations are masters over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. But it is not so among you, but whoever wishes to become great among you shall be your servant, and whoever wishes to be first among you shall be servant of all. For even the Son of Adam did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. So what did Yeshua mean when he says, To sit on my right hand and my left is not mine to give, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared? Well, remember, they're talking about when he comes in his glory. Matthew 25:31-33 says, When the Son of Adam comes in his glory, and all the set-apart angels with him, then he shall sit on the throne of his esteem, or the throne of his glory. And that's the same word in that passage. And all the nations shall be gathered before him, and he shall separate them one from another, as a shepherd separates his sheep from the goats. And he shall set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on the left. So they're asking to be sat on his right hand and on his left hand. And he says, you don't know what you're asking for, because we know for the goats who are sat on his left hand, it does not go well, because they did not treat the brethren correctly. But this sheep and goats judgment is another judgment, where the nations are judged according to how they treated the brethren when the events described in Matthew 24 are taking place. Those who feed them, give them to drink, visit them when they are sick or in prison, are invited into the kingdom. So to recap on the judgments that we see in Scripture. Yeshua returns and sends out his angels to gather the good and bad among the brethren. The wicked are gathered into bundles and burned. The dead in Messiah are raised, and those left over are changed. They inherit spiritual bodies. Yeshua judges the nations. The wicked go into the lake of fire, and the righteous inherit the kingdom. At some point, we all sit before the judgment seat of Messiah, whenever that may be. After the 1,000 years, Hasatan is released and leads the nations astray. The nations come against the holy city, and fire comes down from heaven and destroys them. The books are opened, and the rest of the dead are judged. Those who are not found written in the book of life are cast into the lake of fire. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.